There was a time when Nokia was not just winning the phone market, it was the phone market. Its devices were everywhere, in pockets, in cars, in offices, in schools, in entire countries. And that was exactly the problem. Because when a company becomes too successful, it can stop seeing the future clearly. And when the future finally arrived, Nokia was no longer ready to lead it. To understand how Nokia lost the future, you first have to understand how completely it once owned the present. For years, Nokia was the safest choice in mobile technology. Its phones were reliable, simple, durable, and trusted. They survived drops, dead batteries, bad weather, and bad decisions. You did not need to think about them. They just worked. That matters more than people admit, because most companies do not become giants by looking futuristic. They become giants by being dependable. And Nokia mastered that better than almost anyone. By the 1990s and early 2000s, mobile phones were spreading across the world, and Nokia was perfectly positioned for that moment. Soon, Nokia was not just selling phones. It was helping define what a phone should be. Small, strong, long battery life, clear buttons, familiar design, no drama. That formula made Nokia enormous. At its peak, the company became one of the most dominant players the mobile industry had ever seen. And this is where the story gets interesting. Because Nokia did not fail when it was weak. It failed when it looked untouchable. That is usually how empires get into trouble. When you are small, you are alert. When you are behind, you are hungry. But when you are the standard, you start confusing dominance with permanence. And Nokia had good reasons to feel permanent. Its brand was global. Its supply chains were powerful. Its engineering culture was respected. Its products were everywhere. If you had asked an ordinary person in the mid-2000s which company understood phones best, a lot of them would have answered with one word: Nokia. But then the meaning of the phone began to change. For Nokia, a phone had been a device. For the next era, it was becoming a platform. That sounds like a small shift. It was not. A device is something you build, ship, and improve step by step. A platform is something that lives through software, apps, ecosystems, updates, and developer support. That requires a different way of thinking, and that is where Nokia began to slip. The old Nokia logic was built for a world where hardware ruled. Make the phone better. Make the battery last longer. Make it smaller. Make it tougher. Sell it everywhere. But the new game was different. Now the screen mattered more. The operating system mattered more. The user experience mattered more. And the app ecosystem mattered more than many old mobile leaders wanted to admit. Then, in 2007, Apple released the iPhone. This was not just a new phone. It was a new definition of the category. The iPhone was not trying to be the best version of the old mobile world. It was trying to replace that world entirely. The phone was becoming a pocket computer. Touch first, software first, internet first. And that created a problem for Nokia, because Nokia was still built to win the old game. That does not mean Nokia had no smart people. It had many. It does not mean Nokia had no technology. It had plenty. And it definitely does not mean Nokia had no warning. The danger was visible. But seeing danger is not the same as reorganizing a giant company fast enough to survive it. This is the part people often oversimplify. They say Nokia missed the smartphone era. That is not quite right. Nokia did not ignore smartphones because it was asleep. It struggled because it was trapped between two worlds. It had a huge existing business, a huge global presence, a huge installed base, and huge internal pressure to protect what already worked. That can make a company slow in very specific ways. Not lazy, not stupid, just slow. Too many meetings, too many compromises, too many layers, too much fear of breaking the machine that made the company rich in the first place. And by the time a giant organization fully accepts that the world has changed, the world is usually already gone. Nokia's software became one of its biggest weaknesses. Its old system had helped it win before, but the market was moving toward cleaner touch interfaces, stronger app ecosystems, and faster software evolution. That created a brutal contradiction. Nokia was still big, still famous, still shipping millions of devices, but the center of gravity had already moved. And once Android began spreading across the industry, the pressure became even worse. Because now Apple was not just one dangerous rival. Now there was an entire new mobile system expanding through multiple manufacturers at speed. Apple changed expectations. Android changed the battlefield. And Nokia suddenly looked like a company trying to redesign its house while the neighborhood was already being rebuilt around it. Inside the company, the pressure became intense. This was not just a technology problem, it was also a management problem and a culture problem. That helps explain why big companies often look irrational from the outside. From outside, the answer seems obvious: change faster. From inside, it is not so simple. Which team gets power? Which roadmap gets killed? Which old success do you admit is already dying? How much do you risk? How much do you delay? Who takes the blame if the new strategy fails? Those questions can paralyze even very smart organizations. And eventually, Nokia reached the point where it had to make a drastic choice. In 2011, Nokia announced a strategic partnership with Microsoft and made Windows Phone its main smartphone platform. This was one of the most important moments in the company's history, because by that point, Nokia was no longer trying to defend its old dominance. It was trying to survive. And the Microsoft deal was supposed to be the reset. On paper, you could see the logic. Nokia had hardware experience, global reach, and brand recognition. Microsoft had software, money, and the ambition to challenge Apple and Google. Together, maybe they could create a third ecosystem. Maybe. But maybe is a dangerous word when the market is moving that fast. Windows Phone had design strengths. Some Nokia Lumia devices were genuinely attractive. Clean look, strong hardware, distinct identity. But the market had already started consolidating around iPhone and Android. Developers followed scale, consumers followed apps, and ecosystems, once they get big enough, become hard to dislodge. So Nokia found itself in the worst kind of position. Too late to define the new era. Too early to be saved by nostalgia. Too important to disappear quietly. Too weak to take control again. The decline was painful because it was visible. Everyone could see what Nokia had been. Everyone could see what it was no longer becoming. And when a former king starts negotiating from weakness, the ending usually writes itself. In 2013, Microsoft announced it would buy Nokia's devices and services business. It was not a rescue in the heroic sense. It was the formal acknowledgement that the Nokia phone empire, as the world had known it, was over. That is what makes Nokia such a powerful business story. It is not just the story of a company that lost. It is the story of a company that understood one era so well that it became trapped inside its logic. Nokia was built for a world where phones were objects, reliable machines, practical tools, hardware products. But the industry moved towards software ecosystems, touch interfaces, app platforms, and constant digital engagement. And when the rules changed, Nokia was too heavy, too divided, and too late. That is the cruel part, because Nokia did not look doomed. It looked established. It looked serious. It looked proven. And sometimes that is exactly what makes change harder. A startup can reinvent itself because it has nothing to protect. An empire has too much to protect. And in trying to preserve the old order, it can end up surrendering the future. Nokia once taught the world how to carry communication in its pocket. But when communication became something larger than the phone itself, Nokia could not adapt fast enough. And that is how one of the most powerful names in modern consumer technology stopped owning the future and became a warning about it.